Good morning everybody, welcome back to Cilinix Crypto. I hope you're all doing great and welcome to this new video this morning on Bitcoin. We're going to do a full update. I wanted to speak on some fundamentals, right? Because today we actually have some news coming out. So we'll talk about that and then we'll talk about the different possibilities. I mean, yesterday, of course, Bitcoin failed to break out. In hindsight, it did not even break above balance, right? So it's also not very bearish. I mean, I'm going to do a video on XRP after this, and XRP tried to break out and it failed, right? That's in my opinion worse than not even really trying to break out, because Bitcoin, I mean, yes, I mean, maybe you could say we tried to break out, but ultimately we never did. Well, XRP did and it failed, right? And Bitcoin itself is also relatively stable. Look, if we're talking about Bitcoin kind of in isolation of the market, Bitcoin is fine, and I think Bitcoin is going to be fine. Here on the 4-hour time frame, sure, we lost the 4-hour time frame uptrend, but we've done that so often, right? And we still rallied up higher, and we still had some amazing moves. So that's not necessarily that bad. And then we still have on the 12-hour time frame, look, we still have this massive uptrend. And a lot of support. So I think Bitcoin, especially on the higher time frames, is going to be fine. However, the market, and I'll speak a little bit more on that in my XRP and Ethereum videos, that looks a little bit more likely to potentially get a pullback. And outside of that, Tuesday, by the way, which we spoke about briefly yesterday as well, Tuesday in general is also a relatively bearish day in the last month, right? Relative to Monday, Wednesday, which are usually very strong days. So that's good to know as well. So Bitcoin itself, relatively stable, but like I said, we have some relevant fundamentals right now. Now, the fundamentals at this point of time are fine. The S&P 500 has started to pull back slightly, but does that matter that much? No, this is still in a very clear uptrend. And then something I have not looked at, but something I do keep an eye on, and something I do think you need to know about as well, is the Coinbase Bitcoin premium, but that's also still at a very healthy premium. So the fundamentals around the markets are fine. Within the markets, I'm not sure. But for Bitcoin specifically, they're fine as well. All right. And then today we also, but I'm not sure whether this is actually going to be major news or not. But today we have a speech by Jerome Powell at 12:30 UTC. So be aware of that if any major things are said that can make the markets move as well. But no, I mean, when we're talking about Bitcoin specifically here, to actually talk about the price action, look, we have balance here between 119.6 and 116.7. That's the balance. I expect that balance to hold. Now, I do think that you should be ready for both scenarios, right? So that would either be a bullish breakout, which, you know, if Powell speaks a little bit more about potential rate cuts in 2025, and potentially getting 3 rate cuts in 2025, which would be against the expectations. Like, can we break out? Yes. Should you be ready for that? Yes. Do I think that's most likely right now? Given the recent price action, no. I think it's more likely that Bitcoin is going to be stable. And I actually think there's a possibility, especially if you go to the 4-hour time frame. I think there's a realistic possibility that we are going to grab some liquidity to the downside, right? So that we're going to pull back into this area right here between 115 and 113,000, that we're going to find support there, then get back into balance, right? So that's why I'm telling you, I expect this balance to hold. But a lower time frame pullback, a lower time frame liquidity grab, I think is a possibility, especially if we get some major news over the course of this week. So be ready for that. But ultimately, Bitcoin's still stable, and I still think it's quite likely that sometime in well, maybe July, but August, we're at least going to those equal highs here at 123,000, and I think we have a good chance to rally higher as well. But short term, I think a pullback is more likely than a breakout. But I'll keep you updated on that. For now, at least, that's what you need to know. So thank you for watching. Take care and bye.